Hello everyone. So thank you for your interest in this class. This is also a subject that um has been very dear to me and also my practice. So thank you for signing up for this regenerative design practice. So in this particular class, in fact, I will split into 4 chapters. So now as an introduction, I will go through like 4 different chapters with you. Like this is also exactly how we are going to go through when it comes to the first chapter, why regenerative design matters. And so we will be looking at like the background of regenerative design and also looking at like what kind of global, ecological, and societal challenge like in the architectural field that we are facing, and what is the role of like regenerative design and the key value of it, how is design's role in addressing those issues. And when it comes to the second chapter, I would like to look into different disciplines and also the example and how ancestral wisdom set the foundation of regenerative design, and also to look into like how the traditional practices and also the cultural knowledge from different area inform the sustainable and holistic approaches. And by the end of it, I will also introduce some example of like how can people think differently when it comes to like in incorporating the ancestral wisdom in their design or practices. And when it comes to the third chapter, so surely like for the we will go through the history of like how the regenerative design like developed, and also examine like some real world application of the regenerative design across different region. So since most of it like is actually like geographical like relevance, and I will be also showcasing like different example to go through like what are the innovation, the contemporary application in some of these community-led projects. And when it comes to the last chapter, I hope I do have some time to go through with you some of the current trend, and also like perhaps like there are some practitioner are looking at different ways of doing things. So hopefully that will be also helpful for you to think about regenerative design practice in your respective like area. Okay, so myself is Wendy Teo. I'm the founder of Borneo Lab and also the director of Think and Think, which is a venue in downtown Kuching in Malaysia. So some of my very relevant experience in regenerative practice is like in one of our consortium in Borneo Lab, like good enough transformation. We have been participating in a 2 years consortium of 9 organizations around the world. So bridging sustainability conversation between global north and global south, which was previously for a long time, it has been a gap. Like so there's not so much conversation between the north and the south, and north seems to always assume like when it comes to the climatic challenges and also the issue of the sustainability of like the world is they are viewing it from the global north like perspective, and the same thing for the south. So I think it's important for us like the north and the south to have like several test bed to look into this conversation. And when it's come to the second part, the research on the ethical engagement, this is ongoing ethical engagement framework research on the human nature, which is also we have been engaged by British Council to look into that. And I will also borrow some of the elements that like we would what I did in this work to talk about in the second chapter of this class, to talk about like what kind of impact are we talking about, like when we want to when we enter the site, because the moment we enter the site, the moment we do something upon the context, we already start releasing the impact. So it should be more thorough assessment of like the way we do things. And when it comes to the third part, actually this is a 3 years project like we have with GSA, Glasgow School of Arts Innovation School, and the program director Lynn McCarthy. So we have been looking at the research on indigenous relation. Craft, vernacular material, and cultural asset in Borneo. So it also has been this research work also has been accepted by Taylors and Francis. Okay, so when it's come to the fourth part, is like since 2018, I've been looking at redesigning Bornean aesthetic series, which engage a lot of conversation on the social aspect, cultural aspect, and design aspect of like contemporary Borneo. And I was also the recipient of the Hosing Awards, like a winner next generation in the Asia Pacific region in 2009. So hopefully some of my personal journey and experience like can be helpful of your navigation in the regenerative design. Okay, so when it comes to the first chapter, like there are some pressing needs in for the regenerative practice in design. So there are certain topics that we will go through for this particular chapter. The first part will start from the background and also how we build as an architect, and also what kind of like specification that we are talking about, like acting as a role of architect. And the third part is like the kind of dystopian reality we seem to enable through the short-termism. And the fourth part is like there are some market project, that also seems to play a different direction, have a different direction that define the short-termism. So it's very interesting. The fifth part, I also want to spend some time to reflect on the differences of these in terms of the attitude, in terms of the direction. And on the sixth part is like I want to give you guys a timeline review of like, we used to be our relationship with the land used to be different. And how did we turn from the land listener into a market fulfiller? And then the seventh part, like we are going to come back and look at the shifting role of architect. And then the next part, we will also talk about like the shifting role of architecture education. So, and then it will end with like some personal practice, like some sharing of my personal practice in Borneo Lab. And then we will also end with a time of reflection. So hopefully this process will be fruitful for your understanding, like to set the simple understanding of the regenerative design practice. Our time, okay, we are living in a time of intersecting crisis. So what I meant by that is I look at the place like Valencia, Spain, used to be DMAP, a place that like is quite peaceful, but then recently, like actually it's just happened like November 2024, extreme climate event happened. So there was a lot of like trees and building were damaged, and because of like this is also an unforeseeable like climatic event happened to the region. So this is also like make us make a lot of people questioning like what happened to what the climatic change. So in fact, not simply the global south is not safe, but also the like a lot of area in Europe, in the global north as well. Yeah, so a lot of habitats in on the earth are losing their homeland. So as you can see, this is the area of the Amazonian area, and our relationship with the land. A lot of time, like it used to be quite pristine, like we're leaving the ground like for the nature to grow organically. But then, like since the industrialization, we also step in and enable a lot of extractive economies, which clear the land. So what does it mean? Like in terms of like the habitat and So a lot of animals actually losing a peaceful place to stay in. Yeah, so and we're also living in a time that a lot of young people actually has different has different view from the past generation. So as I also dealing with a lot of young people, like working with a lot of young people, the Gen Z seems to be very different. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the Gen Z is like there is also like the demand on a new value, rootedness, regeneration, and demand for justice. So because of like the willingness to communicate, willingness to confront like what is going on, and also to look into pick out some of the difficult conversation that perhaps like past generation didn't manage or pass on. So this is also the study done by McKenzie. So and And apart from that, global institutions around the world are also beginning to recognize that we can't really build the way we used to. So as you can see, some of these principles actually address like the way we should, the kind of like sustainability checkpoint we should look into. Like for example, how could we build in a way that like promoting the people health and well-being, and how could we use renewable energy, and also the building becoming cheaper to run, and how could the infrastructure create job and boost economy, and how can the building like also spur innovation and contribute to the climate resilient infrastructure, or yeah, or the the how do we build the and contributing towards the fabric of sustainable community. Yeah, so there are several principles, as you can see. Is also showcase that like yeah, there is also there is a shift toward this mindset, and also the shift from collective of generation and the institution, plus the cultural and societal situation. So so then like let's talk about like how we build, how we normally design and build. um, and of course, like the when it comes to how we build, there is also like 2030 net zero target that like we have been talking about like for quite a while now. So over here, I'm actually going to use the RIBA and the UK standard, like when it comes to the architect role in delivering the work to do this comparison, to analyze it. But before that happened, like I also want you to look into like when it comes to, what do we mean when we talk about like construction industry contribution towards the gas emission by in overall. So there's always I think it was always hard to kind of pin down like what exactly is the percentage of like construction industry contribution towards the overall like contribution. But if you look at this chart, it's actually a summaries of like 2021 and 2022. So the industry by large, like how much of the gas emission, global emission, that has been contributed by different sector. So the red dots actually pinpoint that like just simply from the construction industry, or like any construction industry related sector, the contribution, as you can see, is around like 40 to 50%. So these are related to the gas emission contributed by construction industry. And this analysis, I actually would recommend, because I also put it in the link as well, and in the PowerPoint. So you can see like how how serious the analysis being done is from the sector and the end use and the gas that emitted from the process. So let's speak about like the RBA plan of work for architect, for example. Like so the top part is actually 2013. And then the bottom part is 2007. So we used to lack of like the strategic definition and the in use part, which like so A and L, from A to L is actually like, normally when we receive a project, we normally will start doing like by doing the appraisal, design brief, and then we go into the concept design, development, technical design, and then further on we look into the development of the details until we pass on the project to pass on the information for the construction, and then once we done out the entire construction, we will put the building into use, and there's also like the L stage is actually where we will look into the post prep. But as you can see from this 2007 like process, it lack of the strategic definition, and it's also lack of like the in use part. So what does that mean? So you can see like from 2007, sustainability consideration is actually just optional. But when it comes to 2013, there are some changes like inclusion of like sustainability checkpoint. So on the stage 0, we actually need to like start review like some of the previous project to decide like what are the sustainable goal for the project. And then when it comes to 7, it's like what are the post occupancy evaluation. So in terms of like when the client using the building, is it like energy efficient? Is it like sustainable? Like so is it environmental friendly? So there are some assessment like could be recommended like in the plan of work or in the process, like to review what is the occupancy evaluation. Okay, so in 2020, like when it's come like so there are more improvement in terms of like how do we incorporate sustainability outcome, like enable the sustainability outcome in the process. So from 0 to 7, it becoming a more of a holistic like process that like so wherever like we gather from the post occupancy outcome, how could we apply in the strategic definition of any other new project. So there's also a lot of like REBA sustainability like outcome, as you can see. Yeah, how could we promote these few things that link to the sustainable goal? But there's also some critical review about that, like just like all these sustainable checkpoint from different plan of work issued by different country or perhaps professional bodies from different places. The challenge of it is like the wide implementation to achieve the sustainable goal. Like for example, like most of this sustainable outcome guide, they were advisory, they are not mandatory. So a lot of time is still voluntary outtake. And so many practice like perhaps they reference it, but very few of them fully integrate it in their project delivery. So there's also a lot of market pressure because as you can see, so architect is just like producing the work, but it was developer and client. They are the one that like setting out the priority of the project. So some of these key priorities are like tend to be cost, speed, and aesthetic over the deep sustainable target. So making it very hard for architect to kind of push for like the true or real sustainable outcome. So of course, like you may say that like some of these sustainable goal, they will also make the market position of like some of these like product. It could be housing, or it could be like any development product, more favorable. But still, like to truly have the green outcome, it's very different. Like when it's come to the third one, it will be the skill gap. Not all the architectural practice actually has the technical skill to engineer towards low carbon design and circular economy, like, and also incorporating like the circular economy principle when it comes to the material use, and also the ways of like enabling the development, and regenerative practices, like that will enable them to meet the higher standard. And the fourth one is regulatory lag. Even though there is a lot of like building claim that they are in compliance in terms of like the climate emergency needs, or sorry, the like even though they claim that like they are already in compliance with the target, but still like so currently the way we enable the certification over the certain like sustainable like certification process is that you can actually get your certification before you use the building. So basically it actually means there's no assessment like after that. So which is a shame, because in a way that like it doesn't really help. It wasn't, I mean, the regulation, or the certification, in a way it's like you probably in compliance, but is it truly sustainable? So it remain a question. So yeah, now I also going to like, when it comes to this part, I want to go through some of the dystopian reality we enable through short-termism. As you can see, like some of this like critical review from most of the people when they look into these processes, like it has to do with like short-termism. So I also want to go through some of the dystopian reality we enable through that. So this might be the Grenfell Tower, the tower in London. I think it also infamous for the incident in 2017. So like one of the thing is like perhaps like for the developer during the time developing this project, it was like probably considered as like, you know, uh very successful in terms of like, you know, it was an inexpensive, uh, affordable, like and also when it comes to the material used in the process, like it saved a lot of costs, you know, like how the designer like was designing it with the Parker Morris standard. So it's in compliance with like this all the standard like that was during the time. And then like and there was also certain aesthetic like applied to the facade as well. But then tragedy happened like in 2017. So when it burned down, it's actually happened like it was in just a few hours, and there were a lot of people like die in the process. So it's also raised the urgent question about like building regulation inequality, because it's like, you know, what do we mean like, you know, even though it's in compliance, but is there any enforcement towards like, you know, whether it is in compliance with the standard of the time. And there are many ways that like these some of these tragedy could have been like avoided, like by adding the sprinkles like to the system, and also the new like the second staircase, and also the cladding. So but then because of the cost cutting along the process to have the quick win also causes a lot of like fatal consequence. But how many buildings? So it's also raised the question of like how many buildings out there actually have like, you know, similar like condition. So this is especially like a lot of this apply to the marginalized community because this is also a social housing. Yeah, so Kallang was city, so I believe like most of the students from Asia like are quite familiar with Kowloon War City. So because of like certain like aesthetic applied to certain like movie um that you could have seen in Wong Kar-wai like movie. Um so the like one of the short-termism that we find from this development is like during the time when it was developed, it was actually lack of like regulation or oversight to enable it to be more sensible. So it's ended up to be a very dense, rapid and unplanned vertical construction to accommodate like quite a large flux of population. So eventually it was demolished in 1993, but then it's also displaced a lot of like more than 1,000 and erasing the complex social network. So pre-eagle developments in San Luis, United States is actually another like infamous example of like the dense development. So it's a mass public housing project that like was built so quickly in order to accommodate like quite a large community. So there was also a lot of cost cutting in the design and no long-term maintenance and nor community integration plan. So it was designed in 1955 55 by Minoru Yamasaki. So it was also done in an international style and modernism. But what happened was like because of the social isolation and also the maintenance neglect that caused by the development, crime rate spike up and because of the poor design and the lack of ownership. So eventually it was demolished in 1970. So it was also it became the kind of like project or the having the reputation that like it used to be like supposed to design for people, but it's ended out is overlooking like the stewardship in the process. um yeah, so the other example I want to bring you back to Asia because it's also applied to quite a lot of Asian cities. So if you're aware of the flooding issue around Asia Pacific area, like and the islands. So what you are seeing now is actually a picture from Jakarta. So when you look at the right hand side is actually like the sea level, and the sea level is actually higher than the road from the left hand side, and in between there is a wall. So this woman is actually standing on the flood wall that like trying to avoid the water to come in. So in order to tackle this issue, in fact, quite a lot of countries are like facing this flooding issue because of the rising level of sea. Bangkok, like Ho Chi Minh or Shanghai, and Jakarta. So instead of like looking at a more long-term solution of like how do we work with the water, how do we look into like to have because the sinkage of Jakarta also has much more complex issue of like overdrawn of the underground water, like causing the entire land was like gradually sinking like around 40 centimeter per year. So it was quite a drastic shift. So instead of looking at that as the way to tackle the issue, there is a project called like Great Garuda Flood Wall. So it's also the project that like is going to spend estimately like 40 billion. to build like development, to look into like how can they mitigate this issue with a big like developments, and so to which working as a floodgate of like Jakarta. But at the same time, if you look at it, it's also like it seems to be working in the short-term thinking, that which is more focusing on the fast and creation of the waterfront real estate without like really looking at uh, the environmental impact assessment. So currently you can see a lot of model and the developments like being issued to the public to sell this new piece of land and also the development. But because of like the development is taking place right now, so it's also intensifying the flooding. And there's also an issue of like it is going to destroy like a large plot of mangrove, and currently the fishing community is also facing a crisis of like they will need to move to somewhere else. Yeah. So yeah, sadly this is the case of like in a lot of area, like how issue being tackled. And so currently, as you can look at it, it's like the advertisement of the new development has been shown at the waterfront to encourage the more public to look into this um, buying this development. So yeah, like let's look into the critical review of this. So currently, like as you can see, there's a lot of short-termism in the industry, and a lot of time, I think it's important to speak about like the developer-led speculative project, and because a lot of time is also tend to prioritize very quick return on the investment rather than the long-term community or ecological value. So as what you can see from the previous project. And also from the Grenfell Tower, we can see like material and design choices always based on the lowest upfront cost, and rather than the life cycle performance or durability. And the second part is like the value engineering. So value engineering is like, a lot of time when it comes to like certain the design project with like certain contractual route, like if we happen to so there's a, of course, like is in the market society. I think architect in the market society, there is a term, there's a sentence that like we always would say, um, we keep the best interest of the client, but the best interest of the client, if it's happened to be like optimizing the cost, so value engineering tend to be like reducing the quality and cutting essential system, like for example the passive climatic like strategy. And so what about the future proving feature? So a lot of time like in this negotiation is kind of like loosen up in the process. And then on the third part is like the speed. So fast construction timelines. So speed to market, because like development, because of the banking system, which on the fourth I will speak about, like how we build this day, and then how does the financial resources enable like by the bank towards the developer to build like development. Actually this process doesn't seem to allow like not simply the a good quality, but also like the timeline as well. So because of the long timeline, and also because of the banking system. So maintenance and flexibility are rarely factored into like this process. And real estate as a financial product is also some of the like key in this critical review, because uh, architecture is when architecture is working as a commodity, building is being treated as the investment vehicle rather than the live environment. So because of this short-termism, like minimal reinvestment in the upkeep, so an emphasis on the aesthetic over the longevity or adaptability. So on the fifth, I also want to re-emphasize, like, the certification, like LEEDs and green certification it was more used for the marketing rather than, like, looking at how it can long term in a long term, like providing more sustainable living in the development. So some project they pursue sustainability credential only for the branding, only for the regulatory compliance rather than the performance, the real performance. So this is what we call like greenwashing, and this certification also can be obtained earlier in the building life, like without ensuring the long term. So basically, there's no post occupancy review after that. And then on the last one is like the short-term client cycle. So most of the project are actually designed for a specific client needs over a specific period of time without considering how the building will be used or adapted in 20 to 50 years. So there's no incentive built in for the adaptive reuse or life cycle stewardship. So for example, like how about the project that only lasted for a certain period of time? And there are also certain country that, like, you will see in certain country they only allow like the leasehold for 60 years. And what happened after this 60 years? So how do we deal with the building? And we seems to be building, and we kind of like wish that like building can last. But in the reality, most of the building, we will speak about it in the next chapter as well. Does building really last? Yeah. So what do we do with it if it doesn't? Yeah. So yeah, but of course, like having said that, there are also some market project that define the short-termism. So over here we are going to go through that. So it's not entirely pessimistic. Yeah. So one of like this is one of the key project, like so which later I will bring it out as well. Vauban district in Freiburg in Germany. So initially it used to be a military base, but then it was developed like under the PPP. So PPP is actually a very interesting concept, like of public-private partnership with very strong community co-creation. I really hope that like you have a chance to read through the story of Vauban, because it's actually a collaboration of like the grassroots groups, the local authorities, and different stakeholders to enable this district. So Vauban contributes like energy positively towards the grid. What it means is actually means that like it's contribute more than it's consume the electricity. So developer actually saw the value in the green infrastructure, walkability, and also the energy efficient building. So it does create a long-term market appeal. So of course, you can say that it's still like it still sit within the market society, but there's a quite a lot of value that apply in the Vauban district. Uh, there's a lot of like long-term thinking in the process, so which I wish to highlight. Yeah, so apart from that, like because of the way circulation being designed, being set up, Vauban also like, and as you can see, this is the circulation in Vauban, like the collector road, which is like for the waste management or any things that like want to come into the development, they can use this collector road. And then over here is the local street pedestrian. So I hope I have a chance to discuss this project more in depth, because there's so much like to go through about it. But to date, this project actually more than 70% of the resident actually they gave out like personal like car ownership. So they decided to use so there is also a collective awareness of like how they want to contribute towards the environment positively by subscribing towards the public transportation. Yeah. So the second project is BETZ. I don't know how many of you know about this very interesting project. So it's a project started in UK in 1997. So this is also a video that is very interesting to watch.
BedZ is the UK's first large-scale, mixed-use, zero-carbon community, created almost 20 years ago, and yet it still holds true to its zero-carbon vision. My name is Hannah Scott, and I am a Senior Project Officer at Bioregional. Bioregional first initiated BedZ and acted as the lead sustainability advisor, helping the design team to create a community that was truly sustainable from the beginning. The development has 100 homes, office space, and community facilities. The homes are really heavily insulated, making them very airtight so that heat doesn't escape. Electricity is sourced from solar PV arrays, as well as bought from a renewable energy company to top up demand. The iconic wind cowls that you can see on the top of BedZ roofs help with circulating fresh and warm air into people's houses. There are also many green transport solutions on site. There is cycle storage for every single home. There is a car club on site that helps people share vehicles. And there are good transport links to both the bus services and the local train station. People love living here because they love the green space and they love the sense of community that they get at BedZ. Even though it's a high-density development, there are lots of alleyways and open spaces to meet other neighbours. There's a field and there's a pavilion for the community to come together for different events and activities. There are growing spaces for people to grow food together, and all of the cars in the development have been pushed to the side so that children can play freely in the streets and adults can meet and chat. BedZ has been really influential in the thinking of house builders and developers. We used to just think about carbon and energy savings, but BedZ has opened up a conversation about sustainability in a more holistic way. It's meant that we've been able to push government to try harder to make more ambitious policies so that more developments like this can start springing up around the UK and all around the world.
Okay. Oops. So as you can see, despite it is a market-based residential development, aiming for the zero fossil energy use. So because of like the way the stakeholder working together, so as you can see, like there's a lot of like green living and a lot of idea being implemented in the development, also enable the success of this development. Okay, another project that so the first two was actually the housing project, and then now I want to show you an office-related project.
Welcome to the Edge. This is certifiably the greenest office building in the world. But that just might be the least interesting part about it, because the Edge in Amsterdam is also possibly the most connected office space in the world. Working at the Edge is insane. It all starts with a smartphone app developed by the building's main tenant, the consulting firm Deloitte. When you arrive at the Edge, a camera recognizes you by your license plate for automatic access. And because it's the Netherlands, there are chargers available for electric cars. Inside, things start to get interesting because you don't have a desk. No one here does. Workspaces are assigned to you based on your schedule for the day. You have options: a work booth, a meeting room, what they call a concentration room, a sitting desk, a standing desk, a balcony desk. You can even just hang out in the sun-filled atrium all day. This concept is called hot desking, and it's what allows Deloitte to have 2,500 workers, but less than half as many desks at its Dutch headquarters. The app knows your preferences, and when you arrive at your workspace, the lights dim or brighten based on your stored settings. and any of the building's massive flat screens can be instantly paired with an iPhone or a laptop. So what makes all this possible? The LED light panels developed by Philips specifically for the Edge are actually powered by low-voltage Ethernet cables, which means every light in the building becomes its own internet-connected data hub with 28,000 sensors that makes the building and its users smarter.
The building becomes a very important part of who we are and what we want to be, and we actually seen in recruitment that more people are now spontaneously coming to Deloitte because they want to work in this building.
Oh yeah, and then there's these. The building has solar on the roof and on the south-facing wall, enough to power the building and all of the electric cars, computers, and smartphones used by its employees. And those employees are kept warm by two enormous boreholes tunneling more than 400 feet down beneath the building. During the summer, the Edge pumps warm water deep into the aquifer, where it sits, insulated, until it can be sucked back out in the winter to warm the building. Outside, there are beehive towers and bat homes to support the local pollinators, and even the rainwater is collected to flush the toilets and irrigate the gardens.
We are planning to build a lot more buildings like these, and the next one will be smarter, and the one after that will be smarter as well. And we won't stop until all cities in the world are filled with buildings that are intelligent and that are not using any energy anymore. In the end, we will actually need less buildings in the world, but the buildings that are there will be used in a better way, will be more efficient, and will be using a lot less energy than in the past.
Sometimes the Edge just feels like it's showing off, and some of the app functionality isn't quite ready for prime time yet. But most of the time, this is all running seamlessly in the background. It's maybe the most fully realized vision of the Internet of Things the world has ever seen.
It's a building that has sustainability as an important aspect of making a good place to work. In Dutch, there is even a word for this new kind of thinking about the workspace, het nieuwe werken. In a nutshell, it means that work space is more focused on the tasks that need to be done and the working community that it's part of.
Another day at the Edge comes to an end. A custom security robot that looks a bit like R2-D2 wakes up and begins its patrols. Now, if only the app could automatically come conjure up a nice dinner recipe, maybe provide all the fresh ingredients at the end of the day to get you cooking. No surprise, the Edge has that too. Bon appetit.
I want to make a correction over the Edge because it's like, in fact, this building was built in 2015 instead of like 1997. So, oops. So it's also like this is actually the building get one of the highest certification, like green certification, like when it was built, because of like, you know, the data use and also how it's optimized everything from the lighting to user comfort. So because of like all this efficient use in the data, it's also helped to lower the long-term operational costs as well. Yeah. So certainly I also want to give you a moment to reflect. So what do you think they do differently from the conventional project, like for some of the project that we saw? What do you think they do differently from those conventional projects in the market-driven environment, leading to the long-term systemic success of this project? So one of the critical reviews is like the project that achieve long-term outcome beyond the market parameter succeeded because they embedded different value, framework, and governance model into the process beyond profit, speed, and aesthetic. So I think there are some of the differences to be reflected. Like for example, when it comes to building earlier, the language was, you can tell, is totally different. When it comes to a conventional market, ROI is actually means that return of investment is always like need to be within 3 to 5 years. It has to do with like our banking system, like how we finance like a development, how we finance the housing product. So rapid occupancy is being prioritized, and marketing appeal being prioritized. So when it comes to the second, the second approach is like of the project that I shown earlier. There is an emphasis on the ecological regeneration, like for example, like how do we improve biodiversity, water cycle, and air quality. And you can see there's also a lot of like social resilience as well. How does the intergenerational or like the community mix with one another, and the public accessibility and community equity, and well-being indicator as well, walkability. Yeah, like so, and the daylight and cultural identity. So as a result, it's reframed the success metric. And the other things that like I want to speak about is that conventional model tend to be focused on the top-down developer to control. So everything is very client and developer oriented. But then how do we set up a co-design process with as you see with like some of these projects, either in the planning process, or you make it like interactive enough in the operation on the operation side to work with the tenants. Like so how does the collaboration happen, and also the long-term community stewardship, like how do we enable the land trust, the cooperative, and also the share maintenance model. And earlier I also spoke about like PPP, public-private partnership with the community mandates. So as a result is an integrated community or the stewardship governance. So how do you pass down the development when it is in a better state to the next generation or the next cycle of like leadership. So the other things is like deliver an asset model tend to be the kind of terms that you frequently heard in the development project. So instead of doing so, like how do you phase the development in a way that like you enable more feedback loop over the years? How do you set out the adaptive design strategy with like spaces that shift with community needs and climate change? Because like now we are living with quite a lot of challenges that like unpredictable, unforeseeable. How do you cope with that? And the material chosen for longevity, reuse, and compostability. So we basically design for evolution, not the finality. So the other thing is like exploiting regulatory loopholes. So when you look at like, oh, this is how I can basically like the cut costs, or like perhaps like there are certain ways like when you look at the regulatory loophole, it seems to enable certain ways of doing things like and minimize the impact like towards the developer. Like instead of exploiting, so like how to use work with a strong urban policy framework with clear regenerative and sustainable goal, decarbonization goal, cultural narrative about land care, ecological kinship, and place belonging to justify slower place-based design, and also intergenerational ethic, like as I mentioned earlier, how do you enable stewardship, like community stewardship in the process? What are we leaving behind? So it's like how do we align with the policy and cultural narrative? So handing off responsibility at completion. So there's also this is also something that like when we speak about the plan of work, as you can see, it's like a lot of time your role as an architect is kind of phased out. Like when it comes to the end part of the project, we basically handing off the responsibility at the completion or liability, and this is when we call the finish of the project. But how do we engage in the post-occupancy evaluation to continuously refine the design, to find out like what's wrong, what didn't go right from the earlier planning stage, and then how can you do it better in the future. So education engagement for the residents and the user, and how do we set out a very comprehensive maintenance plan that embedded from the start. So basically, the investment in the maintenance and the post-occupancy care. So conventional model also tend to prioritize like investor and developer profit. So okay, instead of looking at that, like how does the multiple capital framework like nature, social, cultural, financial capital being looked at like from the beginning of the project, and also benefit the measure across different stakeholder, not just the developer, like residents, ecology, municipalities, and long-term value created for more than human system too. So it's not simply about human, but non-human as well. So how do you cultivate the multi-stakeholder value, which is also something that we will speak about more later on. So how do we, stepping outside the conventional boundaries and holding the project accountable to following values? Long-term, systemic, and place-based. And what does it mean? It's actually what we call regenerative value. So yeah, regenerative value. Of course, like I said, we will go about it like more in depth, like on the third chapter. But I also want to speak about, like, how did we turn into such a market fulfiller from the land listener? Because you see, we used to work closely with the land, and 1,000 years back, we are all indigenous to certain land, like before the colonization happened, before like industrialization happens, is that we used to work so closely with the land and understood like what the land needs. But what happened, like, how did we turn into market fulfiller? So if you look at some of these projects, this project actually happened okay, for like during the vernacular period, pre-colonial. Pura Lempuyang is actually the landscape that facing, so with the design, with the orientation that like facing Mountain Agong, which is like the highest mountain in Bali, where the Islands of Gods happen. So this is a project in Bali, and of course more image and reference and more story can be read from internet. But at the same time, I also want to use this project to tell about, like, you see, there's it seems to be like in the past there were more respect towards like our relationship with the adjacent elements of the landscape. Yeah, so the other project also happened in Bali as well, like in Tanah Lot, like the accessibility of the island. As you can see, there's a temple at the center of this small island. It was decided by the rhythm and the height of the tide. So during this period of time, like the cycle and also the rhythm of, like, the natural phenomena were being considered or respected in the process. And slowly we move into a more classical and perhaps like imperial like period of time. Like so there's a lot of imperial tradition, like for example the Greek and Romans and Chinese Hans. Yeah, Pantheon. I was using Pantheon as the example because, as you can see, certain natural rhythm still being respected, like as you can see, the changing light throughout the day within the temple shifted around like the ceiling of the project. But at the same time, you can already start seeing the orders and the principle, the structural principle being implemented in the project. And then we move on to Renaissance. Renaissance to the Enlightenment happened like 14th to 18th century. Piazza del Campidoglio, like by Michelangelo, during the Renaissance period. So this is also the project you start to see more orders, and this is and less like natural elements. And then we move on to, this is also a famous like series of drawings by Le Corbusier, like Utopia City, during the Industrial Revolution and Modernism time. So there's a proposal of like how do we build more vertically? How do we have more verticality across the city? How do we through this verticality of the city also enable more open space and green spaces, and perhaps like there are highway that will allow people to move faster, more efficiently, and then pedestrian can be sitting like on top of the like above the ground, so then the car can go underneath and then people can actually walk around. So as you can see, like 60 level building, which will be evenly take space in the shape of a cross and some lower square building. The whole area were meant to be filled with green spaces and recreation area. Material was supposed to be unified, prefabricated. City would be cut through by highway, and the city center would be full of collision, free crossroad. So this is like, isn't that seems very familiar? Isn't this like what we are experiencing in the modern day city? So this is actually already like being predicted or envisioned by Le Corbusier in the 19th century, 20th century. So these are the cityscape of like Asia. As you can see, it's like they look very familiar. They all look very familiar. There's like emphasis of verticality, and like people move efficiently. Like there is also like incorporating more elements that perhaps in the past they wouldn't be able to foresee, like underground metro system. Yeah, and so it becoming also an experimental ground for a lot of star architects, like in the since the post-war to late 20th century. So this is actually an article that happened last year. Like Star Architect in Miami are so over. It's all about branding now. So is design really work for the efficiency of the city nowadays? Is it really like focusing on the functionality or the well-being of its inhabitants, or is purely about the branding or spectacles? So this is actually an article. Like I put the link in here. So if you wish to navigate, like you can feel free to. And it's actually an article about the real estate news criticism towards the star architect culture. So now let's come back and trying to understand, like let's trying to get hold of what is going on. How did we turn from a land listener to the market fulfiller? So during the pre-colonial time, like you see, we as planner, we as architect, we used to be land listener. We used to be the ritual maker and also the place dweller. And architecture was rooted in cosmologies, to understanding like what's going on around us, like the sky, the lunar cycle, the solar cycle, and also the ecology, like the soil, the land, and also the community knowledge. And builders were often embedded in the social in the social and spiritual fabric of their place. Farmers, masons, a weaver, they're not professionals. Like there's actually, I don't think there's a terms like architect in the past. It's just like there's no, nor the terms like the artist. A lot of time is like, these are all spiritual practice, because there is so much understanding you need to know from the community, from the land. So design emerged through like perhaps like observation of the season, the water, like soil, animal behavior, and ancestral memories. So the example of like the Balinese temple orientation, how is follow mountain and sea cosmology is one of the example. Okay, so the classical then we shifted to the shifting our role towards becoming more of a philosopher builder. So we also start working with the elite, like so we're becoming the elite servant. This is also the like kind of sum up our role during the classical and imperial tradition time. So architecture start to formalize as a discipline of aesthetic, like there are certain visual principle that we uphold. and geometry and orders. But then it's still embedded within the symbolism and cosmology, but increasingly tied to the power system. Like so there's more emphasis on the like the king and queen and temple and empire. So the shift like started to emerge, service to the elite becoming part of architect domain, and then we're starting to move away from distancing ourselves like from the collective needs, like which is like from the wider society. So when it comes to the like the next phase, we this is the Renaissance period. So Renaissance period is actually very anthropocentric. So anthropocentric means that like it's very human centric. It's very human focused. So we becoming our role shifted to becoming the mastermind of like the landscape, the planning. So the human centric visionary also becoming key like to the terms architect. So architect as a term also emerged, and there are also certain like distinctive genius figure like Leonardo da Vinci, like Alberti and Palladio happen throughout the time. Like they are key master during that we worship for during that that period of time. But then things started to get a bit like wrong because nature is being seen as something to be tamed and idealized, but not to be lived with, not to be like. So there's you can also see that there's also the rise of the Cartesian logic and also the classical rationality. So nature becomes the backdrop rather than a collaborator. But then like in this time, like nature, you can still see it. They are not really like totally against everything human centric. But then this period actually shifted, seeded the shift. So architect is no longer the servants of the land. Yeah, so it becoming a composer of a human-centric vision. Okay, so when it comes to the fourth, we moving away from the nature even more. During the Industrial Revolution and the modernism happened in 19th to 20th century, our role shifted towards like very technologies, also technocentric focus. So we see ourselves as the urban fixer, as you can see from Le Corbusier drawings. It was like trying to resolve like the issue of efficiency. So how do we enable the functional, efficient product of like the human inhabitants, human habitats. So explosion of city and factory and machinery. So architect begin to solve like urban hygienic and production problem. Yeah. So and also how do we enable mass production, especially like colonial expansion, like because country is going to other country, conquer the other country, and like to be able to live and enabling the efficiency of the other country that they conquer, they will need like a lot of facility to enable. So how does architect like how did architect like becoming the facilitator of that process? So nature at this point becomes a resource or a problem to be managed. So now the architect is part of the machine of progress, often working in tandem with a colonial, capitalist, or extractive system. So there is a key transition point. Architect also becoming more aligned with the industrial growth and speed rather than the place-based wisdom. So on the fifth, like when it comes to the post-war and late 20th century, I think this is also what we recently witnessed seeing as well, like how does architect becoming like style maker, brand architect, real estate enabler. So globalization and the rise of star architect also becoming a terms that like we widely use to coin certain architect like having the celebrity standard or celebrity like enjoying the celebrity attention. So architectural value increasingly tied to the aesthetic distinction, real estate speculation, and branding. So the profession also become tied to market. as we mentioned, I think a few times already, like investment timeline, banking timeline, the finance timeline, developer demand, because developer work very closely with the banking system, and short-term return. So at this point, the architect has become a fulfiller of the market demand, detached from the land, culture, ecology, and long time frame. So now we're shifting to early 21st century, which is today. Yeah, so I think this is actually the an aspiration, and also with a hope and anticipation to see like architect can shift toward becoming the earth aligned facilitator, system thinker, and co-learner with land. Because at the moment we're dealing with so much like climatic crisis, inequality, mass extinction, and architecture complicity with in O3 actually sparked a crisis of purpose. Yeah, so certification like LEEDs and BREEAM, which is like what I mentioned earlier, trying to fix it with a metric. But what does it mean is like to have all this metric? Because a lot of time is still sit within the market friendly frame. So it becoming a bit problematic, like when it is trying to fulfill the market rather than like having a real holistic like green outcome or vision. So new movement also emerge: regenerative design, indigenous design, participatory design. Yeah, so these are the and of course like this movement is ever evolving, and not a return to the past, but I think it's important for us to remember and an evolution. Okay, so now we're back to the shifting role of architect. So the conventional role and the regenerative role, of course, it can move into different direction as well. But because of this class, I'm just going to focus on like the regenerative like design practice role. So in the conventional role, a lot of time like our architect working as a form maker, which is like, how do you look into the client brief and the codes of the regulation, and then the aesthetic like requirement, and then you design the physical form. Yeah, and then in the regenerative role, how do we work as a system weaver? So architect engage with the nested system, like the ecological, cultural, spiritual, economic, and weave them into a living, evolving form. Okay, so in the conventional role, a lot of time like we're a problem solver. We focus on the solving site-specific issue like circulation, daylight, and program. Yeah, but how do we shift our perspective into becoming a pattern seeker? So how do we look into the deep pattern? Like for example, earlier on I also kept mentioning seasonal flow, seasonal changes, ancestral narrative. Yeah, so what we inherited from the past, and the material cycle, and design with them, not against them. Designer of buildings. So in the conventional role, we only design buildings. Design the product and the building by the end of the project timeline. But then how do we facilitate in the regenerative process? How do we facilitate different processes? So engage in a long-term process that may include community activation, land healing, co-learning, or evolving relationship. Okay, so service provider. I think all these terms like from the top, you've been hearing it in the market society. How does architect frame ourselves like service provider? How do we serve the paying client vision? Like I think how do we serve the best interest of the client is actually something that we kind of worship as a tagline. Yeah, but how do we work as an ethical mediator in the regenerative process, navigate and mediate between human and more than human stakeholder, including the soil, the climate, the watershed, the future generation? Artist, engineer, combine creativity with technical expertise. But how about earth ally? How do we build deep relationship with land, culture, and spirit? How do we acknowledge our own positionality and act in service of mutual flourishing? So of course, like shifting role of architect also means a shifting role of education. So how do we enable the interdisciplinary curiosity? Because a lot of times simply learning from the scientists is not simply learning from architect, from engineer, from landscape designers is not enough. We need to learn from the ecologists, anthropologists, farmers, community organizer, and we shouldn't stay in silo in the architecture. And how do we hold space for others? Facilitation, facilitated. How do we becoming the facilitator of different system? How do we listen? How do we build consensus? They are as crucial as drawing and modeling, because if there's no consensus, nothing can really move on in the planning. And how do we look for alternative model of practice? How do we study collective and land trust and slow architectural practice that don't follow the billable hour model? So yeah, so this is, and how do we ground ourselves in the bioregion, and how do we look at the place and trying to understand the soil, language, food system, species, and people, and really get to know it. And how do we, because as you can see, the entire journey is very different from the conventional architect education. And so how do we build inner capacity? How do we, so this path, like as it is learning, and perhaps it's not so much like reference, it's challenging and sometimes it's lonely. How do we build a reflective practice? How do we keep the journaling and also have mentorship and meditation, walk, and also stay rooted in within the community. Okay, here are some personal sharing of the personal practice in through the Borneo lab. So a few years back, like when I moved back to Borneo, like there was a festival approach us and then asking us like to deliver this bamboo pavilion. And then while we were looking at the design of the bamboo pavilion and also some reference about the bamboo, we found this book like Malay Archipelago. I hope some of you know it because it's actually quite a famous anthropological like reference from Alfred Russel Wallace. Also, the same time, like release the same similar theory like also happened like during the same time as Charles Darwin like speak about the evolution of like the species. Yeah. So in the book we found out like in Borneo, in fact, there was quite a lot of bamboo being used at one point for the infrastructure for the building. But during the time when we reached to the landscape, there's nowhere to see all this bamboo, and a lot of people already lose their skill. So as a result, when after we finished the drawings, we found out nobody can really help us building this together. So in order to build this, we actually need to work very closely with 5 different villages that like perhaps the way they can retrieve their knowledge was like through trying to remember what their elderly members told them, and also like reminiscing like how the process being done, like for example the treatments of like the bamboo. So all of a sudden like we also realize that wow, like some of these bamboo, if you treat it as a market product, if you assume that it will be ready right away, no, it's not possible, because in this landscape, to be able to get the bamboo that is like well treated, you actually need to treat it or harvest it during the right season and the right cycle, like right lunar cycle. And all of a sudden you would realize the understanding of moon cycle is equally relevant when it comes to like getting any fiber in the process. So along the process, like because we work with so many people, like in the with different villages, And we also found out that how fundamental like this process need to be documented into record, because otherwise we will lose it again. So we ended up also spending a lot of time like doing the documentation of like how it can be harvested, the process, how the bamboo can be treated, and also how do we slice them into pieces like that can be used later on. Yeah, so eventually when it was built together, it was also a process that like seems to be very empowering for most of the people who participated in the process. So as a lot of architects may think that this is already the end product, this is already the end outcome, but we also realize that wow, it's so important to do the documentation of this process. So we release like we put together a publication that documenting like all the processes that like we learn and put it into a publication. But it's not simply the publication like documenting the bamboo, but also the knowledge about bark, timber, and rattan and ceramic. So there's a lot of like documentation of like the wisdom of the region in the book. And because we want people to participate in the process, so we also did something quite radical by enabling the promotion and also the buying through crowdfunding. And we also had the first first Malaysian cultural project that successfully gotten the Kickstarter funding. So through the crowdfunding, yeah. So which also inspire our next few projects as well, like the narrative of soil and convergence. And apart from that, we're also looking at like other sector like culinary, because all of a sudden you realize all this material culture is also linked to food. It's also linked to sense. Yeah, so everything is actually intertwined and holistic. Yeah, so on the second year, because of the success of the first year, like a Bamboo Pavilion project, we were asked to deliver a second pavilion project in the city center. And if you have been to Kuching or where I'm based in, a lot of time when people referring to first mile, second mile, third mile, they are referring to this 0 point. So this is also the site of our building, our structure. So when we were building the structure, instead of looking at building it like on our own, this time round we're actually looking at like how can we co-build it together? Because from what we know from the first year, in fact, building the structure, like the process of building is supposed to be participatory, and also it was a sacred process that like everyone put in their effort to enable the gathering. So instead of like building for the sake of representing an architecture, we were spending time like designing the brochure most of the time to enable this participatory process. So we spend more time designing that brochure that is explanatory enough, like for whoever participant comes in, they can build the frame, they can deliver the work together. So by putting it together, we thought we factored in like 1.5 months to finish the project, but at the end we took only 3 weeks to finish the 0 point of Kuching. So because of this, we call this the Origin Project. And this also seems to redefine the cityscape as well. And then it was quite heartwarming to see like more than 60 people flew in from around Borneo to deliver the project together. It's also define the landscape and also the 0 point of Kuching. So from these two projects, I hope to explain to you that journey of like deep listening and working with others, and how do we set up the collaborative view with others, and through that process, like enabling more documentation, more reflection, and understanding how the ancestral knowledge can play a part in the planning, in the process. So some time to reflect again. Okay, so there is 5 questions that I want you to think about. Think about the ancestral wisdom in building of your region? Is there any left? If none, why do you think they disappear? And what if the most radical things that you can do as an architect is to listen? What do you listen to? Can you rethink about the accomplishment in architectural practice? And what kind of courage, support system, and expectation are needed in regenerative practice? And the final one is, as interdisciplinary practice is core to enabling regenerative practice, how do you think this practice could be set up? So these are 5 questions I hope you can take some time to reflect and think about. And thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy the class.